So a lot of the ways in which I was praised as a young, white, blonde, thin, feminine entity was, you're so pretty, you're so nice, you're so calm, you're so polite. Oh, your hair, you're this. A lot of it was centered around how beautiful and complicit I was.
Yep.
And I hated it.
Hello and welcome to Fuck Yeah, the podcast where we say fuck yeah to lived experience. I'm one of your hosts, Sarah, and I'm joined today by our guest, Elliot Musgrave, and my stylishly cozy co-host, Robin.
Thank you.
Like, I feel like you've honed the cozy style.
I really appreciate that.
My co-host, Robin.
I feel like whenever you comment on my style, I always feel super seen. Like one time you commented on my neon blue beanie and I was like, oh, she noticed.
Yeah, your beanies. Oh, also, you're wearing a denim jumpsuit, which I feel like is just slightly outside of your normal uniform.
Yep.
And it's really like, it's just like a step in the right direction.
Thank you. That's exactly how I feel about this outfit. I'm like, ooh, blue.
Yeah.
Not black. But you know, because I have a very deep love relationship with black, but I've been wearing this 3 days straight. Also, I just love it since it arrived. So I'm feeling that. Thank you, Sarah.
I do that with new clothes too. I'm like, I'm going to wear this for 7 days straight. And then maybe it's going to go in the closet and I won't see it for a year. Okay. We have a guest today that we are so excited about because I think it last season that we were trying.
It's been a while
Elliot?
we've been trying to get Elliot on.
Okay. It's been a long time coming because Elliot's been doing a lot of really amazing things, and we're so excited to talk to you about them today. Hello.
Hello. I'm vibing with your intro convo because I actually thought of you, Robin, as I was getting dressed this morning. So I was like laying things on the bed and looked at it and was like, you're doing comfy core.
Yes, thank you.
I've been really inspired by your commitment to comfort. I think like between you and Pony Lee this past year, I've really like embraced the elastic waistband and loose fittingness.
Yes,
and,
the flow.
Yeah.
I realize I'm in the presence of two very grounded Leos.
Oh yeah.
And it's, something I like the banter between the two of you is so great because it's just very like loving, but I also just think of you as being such grounded Leos.
That's sweet. I don't know if I think of myself as grounded, but I think I want
Down
to be
earth?
grounded. Okay.
Maybe down to earth is a better way of
But I think that's
describing
also part of the Leo-ness in that internally we do not feel grounded, but we're really good at looking grounded. So it's that like also I think a majority of us don't actually feel inside the level of confidence that others interpret from us. So at least that's my Leo experience.
Yeah. I feel very similar. Although I feel like I'm getting close to achieving the confidence and groundedness that I might project. You know, you fake it till you make it, but one day you might make it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about this a lot, like our brain's power to experience like what we imagine or fantasize about as real. Like I heard recently that one of the ways to actually, this would be a good almost question to pose to you, Elliot, but a therapist told me that with kids, if you have a routine of asking about happy memories or like, hey, remember that time that we went out and we got ice cream and we just like laughed so hard, and you're reliving the memory, the happy memory or the like little glimmers of joy and bringing them up. Or I saw something where you can make a joy jar where something good happens, you drop it in, and then periodically you like take things out of the joy jar. But it actually helps to offset things like depression or low feelings or periods where it feels like things are just really hard, because of our brain's ability to experience what we're imagining as if it is real. So using your memory of happy times to actually offset the, bumps in the road that come up.
Yeah, I really love that. This is my first time hearing that, and like automatically like two things just like popped into my brain of like what's happening there. And one is you are languaging the memory for the child, which is giving it structure. So then like it's like providing scaffolding for it to like live in their mind. And two, you are like in a very deliberate and intentional way showing them that experience with them was important to you.
Yeah.
Like important enough for you to bring it up and to mark it and to speak about it. So what a beautiful gift for a young person to receive that from their parent. That's really rad.
Yeah, I love, that's so sweet how you framed it. Yeah, I think as like, I'm very curious, like what y'all's fuck yeahs are for this moment and going into 2025. Like I'm feeling a strange kind of opportunity to reparent because I think
yourself or your child.
Yeah. I mean, also certainly when challenging things come up for Ruby, it is a call to action, right? Like we're mirroring each other. So I've been feeling really dysregulated, and towards the end of the year, I mean, what's happening in the world and the rhetoric, and I think having gone to Texas, like all these things were really disruptive for me. And as I look forward to 2025, it's like, okay, well, it's not going to be sustainable to stay dysregulated through the next 4 years or for, I don't know, the rest of our lives. Who knows, right? Like it's the same as with the pandemic. You never know really when it's going to end. So I'm feeling this call to just really go back to basics, like slow things down. The joy jar feels like something I really want to put into practice in 2025. And like the things that I love to do, like hiking the trail, like making sure that I'm being intentional about trying a new trail every month. Just like, just finding these little things that bring me the glimmers of joy, and just trying to make sure that they're part of my day to day.
Yeah.
And that kind of feels like taking care of little Sarah too, in a way.
Yeah, definitely. What goes in the joy jar? Like what do you mean?
Anytime like you have a great thing that happens that day, you write it down.
Oh, okay.
And then you just drop it in the jar. And so it came up, a friend sent it to me because it was like a New Year's tradition that the family that she knows does. So they do it at the end of the year. And they spend all of New Year's Day going through their joy jar from the past year.
Oh,
but wow. I'm like, I think I would want to do that more just often. Periodic, or as like a just Sunday
when
ritual.
You feel like you need
or
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we're feeling like disconnected, just taking a morning and like having a nice breakfast and taking out the joy jar and being like, oh, but remember all this joy that we have had?
Plus, joy jar is fun to say.
It is.
And I kind of almost like it more than gratitude. I love gratitude also, but like joy is, to the side of that in a way that's a little more fun way. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. What's giving you a fuck yeah?
I, at this suggestion of our friend Kate Gilbert, Kate was like, you need to go back to school. You need to get to making things. You're a maker. You need to go make some stuff. And I was like, that's crazy. What are you talking about? I'm in the middle of divorce and have 2 kids and no job. But then like the next day, a little thing from LACC Extension arrived and I started, and that is literally 4 or 5 blocks from my house.
Yeah.
They were like, don't forget, get a parking pass. And I was like, I'm walking, bitch. So, but I signed up for a 5-week course, 2 hours a week sewing class.
Oh, that's rad.
So I'm going to like legit learn how to sew, not YouTube know how to sew, but I'm going to like go and like learn like, and it's specifically focused on pattern making. So I'm like, my performance outfits, my poolside outfits are going to get, you know, but it's all a part of this thing where I'm like 2025, I'm going to lean into my fantasies. I've always like wanted to be a big old queer. I've always wanted to be an artist. And for whatever was going on in my psychology was like, but that's not for you. You don't get to do all those fun things. And then I'm like, maybe I do. So I don't know what it's going to hold as far as like how my divorce shakes out and what kind of, maybe I do have to go get like a legit job. But my biggest hope and dream is to just lean into my ability to make things, hopefully sell some of them, or be able to like participate in like, I don't know, making a costume for a performer. And maybe that's like, I'm just hustling all of these different art jobs. That would be like a big fantasy realization for me. So I'm going for that and learning the skills of sewing is a big part of that. And I'm just excited about it. And I'm excited to be in a classroom and have assignments where they're like, you have to make something. And I'm like, oh, okay. Fine, I guess. So I'm feeling good about that. And that's what it's kind of similar to what you're talking about. I think in 2025 with all the shit that's going on, whatever Tesla trucks are blowing up, whatever Luigi's are getting arrested or whatever, I just want to lean into my joy and my ability, my unique abilities to do the things that I uniquely can do and just be as much of that as I can while the storm rages and do whatever I can with that. I mean, maybe I'll make an outfit for a protest or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. What about you, Elliot? What's your 2025? Fuck yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the thing that's been coming forward in conversations over and over again for me recently, which is saying fuck yeah to mindful pauses to allow space for discernment around other people's sense of urgency, and not getting spiraled up into others' urgency and taking it on as my own.
Yeah.
So that there is more slowness and less reacting, more responding.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
That's such a great way. I feel like our culture is set up for this kind of reactionary, urgent, everything's got to like move forward at this like ever increasing pace that feels more and more out of our control.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of mechanisms at play as to like why that is the case, at least from my perspective. But it's always rooted in white hegemony and profit and dominance. Always.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that as I've tried to conceptualize who I am in these moments that call for us to be engaging in direct action, like trying to think about like what kind of direct action is actually in alignment for me. And I'm not the kind of person that is like yelling in the streets and whatnot. Like I've tried engaging that way, and it's really stressful for me and just doesn't work for me. And so I've had to think of like what are other ways, and I think there are subtle ways of countering these things that have been told to us are just the way things are. And in our culture in particular, slowing down is subversive.
Yeah.
And I've also just gotten myself in a lot less trouble as I've slowed my ass down a little bit.
Yeah.
So Yeah. So saying fuck yeah to saying no to other people's urgency.
Yeah. No, and I think discernment is the key word there.
Mm-hmm.
The slowing down and the discernment, to have the time to be discerning, you know, and the calmness, the regulation to be able to, that's been a big one for me as well.
It's really easy to get trapped in survival mindset.
Yeah.
And
that's what they want.
It's what they want. And, you know, being somebody who grew up in poverty, like it's very real.
Yeah.
Right. And it's hard to unlearn that. And that conditions you to respond in really certain ways. But I think like as we're having this conversation about slowing down, about discernment, about urgency, it's really, really important for us to like acknowledge who has the privilege to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who has the space in their lives to like actually be like, no, I need to sit down on the couch for 5 minutes and rest. And that there are people that like do not have the privilege to be able to do that. So I think it can be, it can turn a tad toxic when we're like, oh, you just need to slow down. And somebody who doesn't know how they're going to put the next meal on their table doesn't have the privilege of always being able to slow down.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a great point. I'm curious, like, as you head into this year, because you just finished a big program, like you were hustling. So like the need to slow down
3.5 years
is very real. But I imagine that you're going into what will eventually become your own private practice.
I'm not pursuing private practice immediately, actually. I'm going to assess once I start working. I'll be full-time in the community clinic. And I kind of want to settle into that flow because my program was specifically in community mental health. So I engaged in this process knowing that I would be in a community clinic. So I want to make sure that I'm making that flow the priority of my professional work. And then if my family needs more resources, then I will look at adding some small private practice on the side to, you know, hopefully facilitate my spouse being able to have some space to have some more time to not work because you know, they were pulling extra load for the past 3.5 years in order for me to be able to do this. And they deserve to have some space for themselves now.
Yeah.
Well, it's in such alignment with what you were just speaking to, like with the community clinic. I'm assuming that you'll be able to be engaging with people that don't have the resources to pay for private sessions, you know, that it's like, that's a real privileged space to be in, to be able to afford like that kind of therapy. So it's really great that you're going into it. And I think with speaking to like how going out like to the, you know, a big loud protest or something is not the space where you feel most comfortable, you know, resisting the oppression and all of this stuff.
And it's also not the space where I'm most effective.
Right.
So like if you just accept that this only looks one way,
right,
then you're trying to like shove yourself into yet another box where you could be more effective in a different role. Yeah. One that's more in alignment with your temperament, with your strengths, with your interests. Because this work doesn't have to be grueling all of the time.
Right. And it's not sustainable in that way as well.
No, it's not. And I've been dabbling a little bit in Adrienne Maree Brown's new book, Loving Corrections. And there's a really beautiful part in there where she's talking about the work and how do we make it sustainable. And the metaphor that she uses is migrating geese and how the goose at the front of the V is taking on the brunt force of the wind and working the hardest in order to facilitate an easier flight for the rest of the flock. But the same goose doesn't stay in the front, y'all. That goose does the front for as long as it can, and then it drops to the back and another goose moves forward.
Yeah.
So what she was saying there is that sometimes we need to pull out of the front line into the back to rest, to hibernate, to tend to ourselves, tend to our internal selves, tend to our home, so that when we are out there engaging in the work, we are effective. And that's how the work becomes sustainable for years and years and years. It takes a whole flock, not just a single person.
That's right.
Yeah, I think I'm curious because you've just come out of this kind of heavy push. And I think maybe this might relate to some listeners, right, going into the year ahead. Like the work you have ahead of you in community clinics is a little bit of that like goose that's in the front of the pack and taking on. I mean, I know from having gone through the pandemic with my therapist, like she had to take time away from her practice. And that was like a really challenging time, right, to be without a therapist. But we've now been we've been together now for many, 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 many years. And it was like, I understood the toll that everyone else's mental health crisis was taking on her and her role. And so I'm curious, like, how you're preparing for this work that you have ahead.
Yeah. Right now I'm in this liminal space as it relates to this work. I've just finished this graduate program. I am being hired by the clinic where I did my internship, and I continued my internship even when it was time for me to be done because I wanted to just continue doing the work. So right now I'm just working for free in the clinic, and I can't be hired until I get my associate's number from the BBS. Sorry, it's like a bunch of technical, boring information.
What is the BBS?
The Board of Behavioral Services.
Okay.
So it's just the board that oversees mental health professionals and their licenses.
Yep.
So I'm in this in-between place, and I'm trying to utilize this in-between place to rest, to recover, to with discernment say yes to social things that I haven't been able to do. And I'm trying to make space to process the experience of the past 3.5 years of striving for decades to try to finish something in school, getting to a place where I kind of had accepted, like, okay, well, college just isn't for you, and that's okay. Like, you can do other things. Coming back to it, and like finishing a master's as a first generation college student. So I'm trying to allow myself space to like process that. Yeah. It's been really hard because I finished the program and it was immediately the holidays.
Right.
And I thought I was going to have like a really solid shower cry right after I finished. So like I hit submit on my final research and I was like, okay, that's done. Like you've turned
now
in
I get
everything. I'm like, cool. You can go in the shower and cry now. And I got in the shower and it was like, okay, well, I guess this isn't happening. You can't force it, but it was just a little surprising. But that said, I had to go to like a staff holiday party for our small business, literally like hours after I turned in this like 30-page research that I'd been working on. So I went from doing this program into the holidays, and now I'm like, okay, holidays are done. Now let's settle and like be with myself.
Like, who are the people you work with in the clinic?
I'm at the Los Angeles LGBT Center.
Yeah.
I'm at the community mental health clinic. I'm predominantly at the Hollywood campus, just a couple blocks off of Hollywood Boulevard. I see, in theory, all kinds of people, but I will say I've had very few non-queer clients. So I see cis gay men, trans people, people of color, and all different ages. So there is a separate program for youth services. The youngest clients that I've seen are about 24. Oldest people that I've seen are in their 60s. So, and I think it's also important to outline that I have about 1.5 years of clinical experience at this point. So I'm still technically a student therapist. I will soon be an associate marriage and family therapist. So I'm very much a baby in developing as a clinician. But
But a year and a half is nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, that's like you've got, I'm sure, gotten so much experience. And
yeah, it's kind of wild. It's a really strange field to learn how to be a professional in.
Yeah.
You do a ton of schooling where you're learning like a ton of theory and you're talking about these things and it's really heady, and you kind of have this idea in your mind of like what a therapist is.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you get in there and you sit with your first person and it feels like you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was a process for me of learning that the reason that I was there is because of who I am, not because of like what I thought I knew.
Right.
And I had a supervisor at one point when I was in supervision, and I was kind of like lamenting about how I was feeling about the job that I was doing and, you know, this intervention and that intervention. And she literally was like, Elliot, I hired you for like who you are, not for what your idea of a therapist is. So just get in there and be yourself.
And
I was
love that.
Oh. And when I reflect on it, the times where I feel like I have been the most effective are the times when I'm just being authentically myself.
Yeah.
And it's weird coming in. I've never worked an office job before.
Yeah.
I've never been this kind of professional. I don't even know how to dress for this kind of thing.
Cozy core
is what I've been leaning into. But yeah, I just kind of like learning like, who am I in this context? And noticing when I'm kind of like leaning into my idea of the thing versus manifesting like who I am in this thing.
Right.
I relate so much to what you're saying right now because I've been caught up. Like this year, I'm actually going to really invest in my own practice. Like I've felt so kind of, I've had such imposter syndrome. I know that term is overused, but I don't know how else to describe it for so long about like the teaching and the coaching and all of these things that I do, that it's like really held me back from actually just like going out there and being really intentional about like, this is what I want to do. And actually I'm really good at it. I realize this year I will have been teaching sex ed for 18 years.
Yeah.
It's like, why am I, you know, but I grew up in a household that was super academic. My parents were in grad school when I was a young kid at Yale. Granted, they were doing theater, but like still it was very ingrained in me that you have to have credentials. And I feel like for so long, I had all of these ideas about how you're supposed to show up as a professional. And it was almost like there was this division down my body where there was me and then this professional drag version of me, and never the two shall meet. Right. And
I like that professional drag.
But like, I think also like the time, I mean, we're all kind of around the same age, like lived experience, mental health. These were not things that we talked about or that were accepted as quote unquote, like valid experiences. Right. And so it's just like this time I think is really calling for us all to draw on our lived experience and really be confident in like our unique, authentic worldview having fucking value.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very anti-patriarchal, or at least the patriarchal capitalist system tells you have to have these things in order to be valid. And it's just like, I feel like I'm going through it. You guys are much more similarly aligned on the type of work that you're doing, but like with the artwork and everything, I feel like I'm kind of finally just emerging. Like I don't need somebody else to validate that this is like who I am and what I want to do and all that stuff. I'm just going to go fucking do it. And the more I do it, it seems like people love it. So it's like, it's rather than the external validation, I think it's like that internal validation And then it seems like the external world will then validate you because you are that professional. You know, you have 18 years of sex ed experience. Like that's not much that, many people can hold up a candle to. So it's like, it's there, we just have to like show it, I guess, or go out and do it.
Yeah. Or like what you're saying about the internal validation. It's like having your internal compass and trusting it. And then I do think that the like energy that you put out, the world responds to it. Right. Yeah.
I would love to just invite a disruption of the entire concept of like professional and professionalism, period. I despise the word professional. It's coded for a whole lot of bullshit gatekeeping.
I like profesh.
So I've been trying to imagine different ways to articulate what I mean when I use the word professional. So I've been using the word clinical a lot more when talking about my work because that pertains to my field versus professional. One of like the pillars of white supremacy is this idea of expertise over experience.
Right.
Right. And once that's sort of that gatekeeping part of professionalism where only certain people can access the resources to acquire an education. Only certain people can access the scare quotes here for people who can't see the video, appropriate clothing to exist in these spaces, and people whose bodies and cultures align with what the dominant culture is saying is appropriate for these spaces, as it pertains to your hair, to how you dress, to all of these things.
Yeah.
So just like, let's just like shake that box up. And I think by us showing up in these spaces as we are and having the courage to be like, okay, well, this is what it looks like for me to dress appropriately in this space and be authentically me. We start to give other people permission to play a little bit more.
Yeah. And it becomes more apparent how stupid these rules are.
They're so dumb.
And so
so
restrictive.
Dumb.
Your hair has to be this long, or whatever it is. It's very culty. It's very like you have to conform or you're not valid. It's so ridiculous. And especially I think the field that you're going into, you're so uniquely qualified with your lived experience and everything.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about your personal journey because I think, there's so many different ways we could talk about this, right? Like your years as a personal trainer and how that equips you for your clinical work. Like I think that experience is so applicable, right? But I'm also really curious about like you've gone on this journey. I'll call it a gender journey, a gender affirming journey that I think is so rich. You are a leather title holder. Since that, you've also gotten into go-go dancing and pole dancing, which is typically a bit more of like I know it's super gay, but it's also a bit more of like a feminized craft. You're a parent. You've gone through your a lot of your at least physical changes as your child has already been in the world and going through their own journey with their identity and like coming into the world as a person. So like you're almost like mirroring each other, right? In this like self-identification. And this is like what we're talking about when we're talking about all this lived experience that you bring to the work that you do and how validating that must be for some of your clients to work with someone like you. I'm just curious, like how you see this journey, like what, if you're like kind of doing the, hawk flying over, like what has it been?
There's a lot of different, my brain just went out in all these different directions. I think the thing that's feeling most forward in my mind right now in response to that is that some of us are intended to be educated by the world Some of us are tasked with going into the world and learning from the world and then coming back around and bringing that knowledge back to our community. And I've always, even as a very young person, felt like I can be told something. And this was like so frustrating for my parents that I can be told something, but I have like this deep need to like get in there and experience something in order to like actually learn. So while it was really painful to go through trying to finish school multiple times since I started when I was like 21, 22 years old when I first started trying to do college, I needed those experiences in order to arrive right here, right now. And I wouldn't be the same clinician that I am right now in the absence of those experiences. It's very interesting. So the end of this program, I had to write this 30-page thing that was heavy on reflection. A lot of the whole purpose of this was reflecting on my entire experience in this graduate program, plus my personal experience, plus my clinical experience. And sort of my off on the side while I was doing this, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start looking at Chiron. And
what's Chiron?
Chiron is maybe a mini planet, maybe a like astral body, not really sure. Meaning like they're not really sure. It's kind of been classified as both, but its placement relates to like your core wounding. And what is your life's task to like do work around that core wounding. And within mythology, within Greek mythology, Chiron was the wounded healer. And in looking at my Chiron placement, and like I know like the astrology queers are probably like fixing out. I am not an astrology queer. I dabble, and there are queers out there that know way more about this than I do. So I'm doing my best here. So Chiron's the wounded healer. And there's a lot of in the Chiron like mythology that mirrors a lot of my experience in life. So that was really interesting to see. I found out that I have a natal Chiron complex. So Chiron's like really dominant in my life apparently. And
interesting.
As I'm like writing about what I see as like my signature theme that I've discovered about myself throughout this program, I realized that my Chiron placement was exactly what I was writing about a core wounding around abandonment, around neglect, around belonging, and how my journey in the world has really been this journey around like finding belonging and figuring out who I am. And like I had to do all that work around that core wounding in order to be an effective healer.
Right.
And not to say that like, I've arrived and now I'm an effective healer. This is an ongoing process that we travel around the loop over and over and over again. It's not a linear process. So yeah, that was my meandering ADH answer to that question.
I love that. I think we were talking about Chiron in our astrology episode because there's something about our Chirons and North Nodes that I think has to do with our alignment.
I just remember that you're like my daddy.
This is what the astrologer told us, is that I was likely Robin's father in a past incarnation.
I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah, I like it. I'm like, I don't totally own my like daddy-ness, but I probably should more. I'm curious about how that relate. I mean, first of all, the thing that comes to my mind is just something that I think really came out of my program that I did this year, the Embodied Intimacy Coaching Program, is that in doing the work, like the healing journey is something that you really commit to, whether you kind of realize it as you're going into the work or through like learning, to be a clinician, or in my case, like a coach, that you're suddenly like, oh, I'm also here for the healing.
Right.
Like this is very much part of my, like what is calling me to this journey. This idea, you were describing mutuality earlier, I think probably before we started recording, but that there is that like kind of synergy that can happen where it's like, oh, I'm healing myself. There's like a lot that is benefiting me personally through learning this modality, doing this work, showing up for people in this way. And I'm curious if there's any correlation for you. When I think about like going back to kind of the gender journey question, you've very much been like drawn to not the extremes, but for some people, they might be considered the extremes, right? Of like, I want to try this on. And now my journey is going to take me to try this on. And like, how is that connected, do you think?
So I'm feeling reminded of a time when I was a young person. I think that I was a teenager. And I was in high school. I don't remember who I was talking to. I think it was a peer, but we were talking about gender. And I remember this is before, like I had no concept of trans at this age outside of like what I learned at church and from the media that was available in the 90s. And we all here know what that looked like.
Yeah.
But I remember saying to someone that I didn't experience my own gender in the absence of other people around me. That when I was alone, I had no sense of my gender. It was just me. Yeah. So I didn't understand at that point in my development, because I was only like 15, 16 years old, the idea of gender being a social phenomenon, right? So when I really like experienced the more overtly masculine presentation of my gender journey, was after I won my leather title, the Mr. Precinct title. And very suddenly there was a overwhelming amount of masculine pressure on me that I hadn't experienced before, as well as masculine attention. And I think that I responded to that pressure in the same way that I responded to feminine pressure as an AFAB young person of this is what I'm supposed to do / need to do in order to be accepted here.
Like these are the expectations and you have to uphold them all the time.
So
in public.
Being pushed to the other side of this false binary. And I stayed there for a little while, and it didn't feel any better than being on the side that I started. And it took me a little while, I think, coming out the other side of that like title experience to give myself permission to like lean into what feels good for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just me. So sometimes that means a little bit of makeup. Sometimes that means more feminine clothing. Sometimes I still like putting on my full leather formals, which is like a very structured masculine aesthetic. But more and more I'm leaning into like when I do that, I need like some eyeliner, some glitter, some nail polish, some pearls, like something to subvert it a little bit.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, the thing that's so interesting, I think, about what is gender affirming for people is that, like, I know for myself, the attention, like the pressures to be feminine, I don't experience them like that. You know, like I experience such like joy and euphoria when I am recognized and appreciated for my femininity. And it feels great, right? So like someone else could go through the exact same journey that you went through, get their title, suddenly be getting all of this masculine attention affirmed in their masculinity and be like, I'm home.
Yeah.
And for you, you're like, there's something else. It's not quite there.
But I think anytime somebody tries to put any label on me, I buck against it because I've come to understand that like the renegade archetype is a major influence in my life. And when I was a teenager and starting to express myself aesthetically more in alignment with the way I wanted to, I was engaged, I know now, in a process of destroying the thing that I perceived other people had placed my value in.
Wait, say that again, because I feel like that's a really powerful statement.
I was destroying the thing that other people said was valuable about me.
Right.
So a lot of the ways in which I was praised as a young, white, blonde, thin, feminine entity was, you're so pretty, you're so nice, you're so calm, you're so polite. Oh, your hair, you're this. A lot of it was centered around how beautiful and complicit I was.
Yep.
And I hated it.
Yeah.
So as a teenager, and I started shaving my head and piercing my face and dyeing my hair purple and wearing ratty, weird clothing. And the feedback from my family was like, oh, your hair is so beautiful. Why do you, your nails grow out so nice. Why do you cut them off? And
why do you do that to yourself?
Yeah. Why do you do that to yourself? You're such a pretty girl. And I think I understand now what I was pushing back against was like, I was so much more than that.
Right.
But that didn't felt seen or valued.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that process. And then kind of getting on this, I don't know. I'm still in this weird relationship with masculinity, and what it means for me and like which parts of it feel good and which parts don't. And yeah, like I said, it's nonlinear.
I heavy relate to that experience. I had a similar experience as a teenager, and I felt like the things that I was doing aesthetically was just to be like, fuck you. I don't want to do those. But then I did get caught up in the like heteronormative like relationship standards and all of that stuff. And in the recent like 3 or 4 years, breaking out of that again and kind of trying to figure out what my whole style is. But part of what I get annoyed with is the binary. And I know the binary is great for a lot of people. They can feel really affirmed in it and they like all of that stuff. And I'm like, great. But I've been having like, I'm starting to refine it and everything in my aesthetic and stuff. But it's like, I do like wearing makeup, but I like wearing makeup in like a kind of performative way, or it's like aesthetics. I like how I look with certain kind of eye makeup or whatever, but like the black lipstick or whatever is a great way for me to be able to wear lipstick but not feel like I'm in a certain like gender box, or it's like I know what you're talking about. It's like wanting always something in there that kind of cracks the veneer of the gender presentation. And a while ago we had a conversation, because we were doing a performance together where you were pole dancing and I was being a big old freak, and we were both being very freaky, but you had like this feminine character. What you had you have a name for her, right?
When I dance, I've just been using my sort of like online handle of Uncle Birdie.
Oh, that's right. Uncle Birdie. I love it.
And I was dancing and just using my first name, but then I kind of wanted to create a separate container for that persona, and particularly as I'm going into clinical work, like not have my government name like so tied to that part of my life.
We had this conversation in it of how you feel like you're able to embrace feminine expression now because you're coming from this queer angle versus when it's put upon you and expected of you and is also just happens to be part of an oppressive system, you know? And I loved that so much. It's like not that it's like Gottmik, but the Gottmik, the drag queen, I think there was one interview where he was talking about how it's only once he transitioned that he felt like he could truly embrace like his drag queen persona. And I'm like, yes. And I mean, in a way it feels a little bit like, I think we both have like a similar oppositional defiance kind of just like, well, you can't tell me what to do, you know, but it's also just like, why are all these rules and all of this stuff? But coming from it in this, from a different angle, all of a sudden I feel like it can be fun and celebratory and you can enjoy the praise for it or the validation.
Who is it for?
Exactly.
Is it for the other? Is it for the observer? Is it for the people who hold power over you? Or is it for you?
Right.
And it was leaning into femininity or the things that we've coded as feminine because like we are the ones that are assigning meaning to these things. Yes. They don't inherently mean shit. But embracing these things that have been labeled as feminine because it feels good for me, not because I'm following a rule or I need to do it in order to be accepted, to be loved, to be connected with others. It never felt good to put anything on solely because that's what I needed to do to be accepted. And finally, you know, maybe I had to get to being in my 40s to have like the inner fortitude to be able to be like, no, I'm doing this because I think it's pretty. I think it's fun. It makes me happy to do it.
Oh, I love that. Before we move on, I have to just say, I think recently, I can't remember where we were, but you had your pearls. And your red lipstick and your mustache. And I was like, I am living for this. It just feels like, you know, I mean, I think I met you when you were in the roller derby, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That
well,
was,
because we all met each other like about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
This year, this winter is like right around that time.
Yeah. So probably the last time that I had been in person with you wearing like a vibrant lipstick was way back in the beginning, right? And so I was like, gosh, how cool. You know, like sometimes I think of like if we could send ourselves snapshots, like if we could send snapshots back, I'm like, I was sending that snapshot back to my, you know, myself meeting you because I was just like, you have landed in this place. It is so cool. But I am really curious, and I want to make sure that while we have you here, you have a teenager. Like you're kind of like the canary in the parenting coal mine sometimes, I feel like for us. Because I'm like, oh, this is what's coming. I'm so appreciative of the couple people I have in my life who have kids that are just slightly older. And like, I have to imagine that you feel like this journey that you've been on to your authenticity, to centering like what brings you joy versus the pressures from the culture positively influence how you show up as a parent. Is that like generally how you see it, or do you think is it different?
I would say now, yes, you know, because my kid was only like 5-6 years old when I started HRT, and I also began my transition quietly. So there were only a few people in addition to Pony that knew that I had started taking testosterone. And I was also in still in the legal process of my divorce from my child's father at the time. So it was really scary because within these things can turn ugly. And there were some things being brought forward in the divorce that were intentionally meant to sort of color me as not a fit parent. And their father was trying to take sole legal and physical custody. So I had a lot of fear around that this was something that was happening for me coming out.
And this is where you can see how the systems of oppression within just the way we appear to others can have real practical, real world consequences. Thank you. I was like, thank you for the word.
Yeah.
We're punished, actually. I mean, punishment is a better way to describe it.
Yeah.
So my kid, I think the age that they were at that time, coupled with emotionally, developmentally where I was, the tools that I had at the time, I didn't really know how to navigate that super well. And particularly understanding like, okay, what do I tell this 6-year-old about what's happening? It was really hard. Yeah. My kid took it really hard. And it's been a long process over the years of like reconnecting and repairing and learning how to allow them the space for their own process. Like accepting that they needed to mourn the loss of a mother.
Yeah.
And for me, that was really challenging to accept because I was like, I never left. I'm still here. I've always been here, particularly as someone who has experienced parental abandonment. I was like, no, I haven't abandoned you. I'm here. And it wasn't until they've gotten older and are now an adolescent and can explain, yes, I know that you didn't leave me, but I lost the idea of having a mother. I felt like I had no maternal figure. And it took me a while to get to a place where I could have some softness and compassion for their experience without taking it personally.
Yeah, that defensiveness, I feel that because I also have parental abandonment. And so then when it comes up with my kid in any way, you know, like the divorce, right? Like a way that they process that is as a form of abandonment. And that is so hard to work through as someone who's like, oh, but actually like, this is what I've constructed my whole life in order not to do, and to make sure that there are people around you who like will not do that. And yet you're still experiencing this as a form of abandonment. And it's just that thing of like, you can't control how somebody else receives your actions. But that like struggle to not get defensive as a parent is so real, because you have to be like, okay, I'm going to put this in this little jar. I will deal with this later so that I can be present with these feelings that are coming up for you.
Yeah. Like those of us that didn't maybe have like the best models as we were growing up as well. Like, I think it's so important for us as parents to remind ourselves, like, they are children.
Yes.
Like, their responses, like, it doesn't have shit to do with me as a person. They're a child. So they're having a perfectly appropriate response that a child who is still developing emotionally should have. And one of the things that I really value that I learned in school was around that we are relational beings. Like, our very survival relies on us being connected to other human beings. As far as animals go, we are born the most vulnerable, and we have the longest sort of out of the womb gestational period of any other creature.
Yeah.
So for babies, for children, connectedness is survival.
Yeah.
So any kind of disruption in connection is going to feel like they are dying.
Yeah.
So when you think of it that way, those big responses make a lot of sense. And in addition to that, they have to psychically protect the connection with the caregiver in order to stay connected to survive. So the thing that happens in their minds is when something disrupts the connection, they cannot assign blame to the caregiver because they need to stay lovingly connected with them. So it gets internalized.
Right.
And they interpret everything as being because they are bad.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not loved by my caregiver because I'm bad. Therefore, I need to fix it in order to bring the caregiver back in connection with me.
Right.
So us as caregivers are tasked with making sure that we are always attending to the relationship instead of like a desired outcome of their behavior.
Oh my God. Yep.
Okay, say that again.
So all of our actions as parents and how we relate to our children should be centered around a focus on the relationship.
Yes.
Let's just take a clean room. Is my desire for my child's behavior to be centered around their room being clean, resulting in harming my relationship with the child? And if it is, that clean room is probably not that fucking important.
Right.
Oh, that's such a great point. I also think that as you're talking, this idea, the theme of urgency from earlier in the conversation is popping up for me in relationship to parenting, because I think something that comes up for me a lot is if there's a break or something that requires repair or, a dysregulation for my kid, I have a lot of urgency to fix it. And I think the great lesson that I'm learning is this, and I'm very much in process with this right now, of having some patience and trying to step back from that urgency, because it's that might not actually be what the moment is calling for.
Yeah.
And learning that repair can happen over a very long, you can have conflict in a certain age and stage with your kid that maybe is just going to be there. And you have hopefully a lifetime of experiences where you don't know when the repair is going to come. It might be 10 years down the road where suddenly it's we found some softness for each other around this thing. But I find that urgency gets in the way of my parenting a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's this... At that point, who's the repair actually for?
Right.
Is it for
Yes.
you so you don't feel like a piece of shit? If
Right.
it is, then that's not coming from a place of where it's for the child.
The relational dynamic that you're describing.
And we have to, as adults, as the adult in the relationship, see to our distress tolerance. Being able to tolerate, this doesn't feel good. And know that we're going to be okay. And I think in giving our kids space around these things as well, we're teaching them that their feelings are okay. They're allowed to be mad at us. They're allowed to be sad. They're allowed to have their own timeline and their own process around their feelings. Not making them responsible for our feelings the way we were responsible for our parents' feelings.
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's also, it's so interesting that, in that elementary school age, a lot of it is about conformity, and they want to know what the rules are so that they can be that person that's able to do the things, or in normalcy and conformity is just kind of a big deal. But then as you start going through puberty, individuality and identity becomes a big deal. And being aware that others perceive you, how that affects you, what you want them to think versus what they do think, all this stuff becomes such a big thing. And that's where a lot of people lose connection with their kids. But I think with you, it's so interesting that, it's this other layer too. Like in my divorce, part of what has been a point of contention for him has been that I changed, but for me, I feel like I revealed myself. You know what I mean? So I was actually masking to please him and my kids, to be like, I'm a mom, and all this stuff. And it's been a lot of heart pounding weirdness for me to just start dressing the way I want to in front of them, And so I can see how it's like also heartbreaking to have like this child you love so much, and you are going through this change that is a big part of you letting go of the guises that have been put on to you and becoming more yourself, and that being such a heartbreaking shock for them. But now as they're going through this process of figuring out who they are, it's kind of, I can see them like kind of getting closer to you or maybe, you tell me, but it's like they maybe understand how much nuance there is in what happened in their childhood and what happened in your adulthood at that time,
I mean, like, listen, this kid's rad as hell.
Okay, first of all, let me just say, when I was over the other day and I saw them, it's always shocking when kids turn into adults, and I know they're not an adult, but it's just like so tall, but so put together. I mean, the goth of my dreams is what came out of their room the other day, where I was like, oh, look at all these layers and all this black hair now and everything. And I don't know. It's just, I'm like, nom, nom, nom.
Yeah.
This is like a good teenage.
They're experiencing like a awakening of expression right now, and an exploration that, gosh, it's so like amazing to watch. It's humbling.
They're 16 now, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
16. And there's a great deal of who they are that is just who the fuck they are as a person. That it's really something to observe a person from the very moment that they're born, like even before.
Right.
Like to feel how they move.
Yeah.
And then to see them from their very first breath, and to learn even as an infant, like who they are, what their personality is, what their likes are, and then see that just develop.
Yeah.
So I want to say there's a very small amount of all of that I can take credit for as a person, as a parent. I do think it's so important to give them credit for the ways in which they are like the masters of their own course. This child has always been such a strong advocate for themselves. I do think having a parent who's modeled taking the risks that I have, it does give them permission. Right. Like they know that in our home, it's a safe place for them to explore expressing themselves. And Pony and I have really tried to foster a home where there's a playfulness about trying different things on. And it's okay if you like something one day and then you decide like it's not for you anymore. That's part of the process of figuring out where you are in this moment.
And such a stark contrast to their other home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak too much to like that because I don't live there.
Right.
So I don't know. All I know is what is reflected to me through them. And I have to constantly hold that like that's through their lens.
Right.
And they're in their own process of figuring out like what they are learning there that is valuable for them that they want to carry forward, and like what they don't. And there's plenty of things about the way Pony and I are and the culture of our home that it's like they're not really about it.
Right.
So I want them to have the freedom to like take from both places.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there are things of value from both homes and things that they might not want to carry with them into their adult life.
This is like the benefit and the shadow, I think, of divorced, upbringing, right? Like that's definitely a lesson that I've had to learn as well, is like everything that comes back is not necessarily truth, right?
Yes.
So you're just like, you're hearing a third-hand experience through somewhat unreliable narrator, but the thing is it's their truth in that particular moment.
Yes.
Their experience of the thing, which their experience is valid, but it needs to be accepted as the experience of any other individual.
Right.
Where like we co-create reality.
Yes.
Like we craft it together. So I wouldn't accept anything that one person said as like the factual, empirical, or using like more words that I really hate, like truth
with a capital T,
legitimate,
of how things happened. Yeah, so like not allowing ourselves to get spun up in that, and like do fact checking.
Yeah.
Do consult with the other adult on the other side of this. And hey, here's, this is what I heard. This is my concern about that. Is this, what was your experience of it? I don't know, but it's a tricky, complicated world that we live in.
I feel like we're all looking out like a little pinhole. Mm-hmm. And by talking to each other about each other's experiences, you can get a bit of a wider view. But it's only, it's very ethereal.
We do a lot of story crafting.
We're story people.
Yes.
People are story people.
We like to make stories about the things that we hear, that see, and experience. And we make it mean things.
Right.
We are also meaning-making beings.
Yes.
So it's kind of amazing to adopt a position of like, what am I making this mean right now?
Right.
And are there other things that this could also mean?
Yeah.
And being open to other realities.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's like such good. I mean, that is so applicable to parenting, but also like going back to kind of where we started the conversation, like as we go into this year ahead, kind of the meaning that we attach to the things that are going to be happening in the world. And that doesn't mean like we don't have some responsibility, right, to stay alert and aware, but also understanding that like everything we receive is going through our own filter, and we can kind of create the meaning in our own spheres that supports us best in being able to show up in the world.
And we can also slow down, coming back to slow down our meaning making process. Not necessarily accept the first meaning that comes to mind as like, this is what it is. I think that just gives us so many more options in regards to how we want to respond to things.
Yeah.
If we want to respond to things.
Not everything needs a response, and that's that discernment factor also. Sometimes you have to sit with something for a while, and because also there'll be things with my kids where like my fear will get spiked because I've assigned like a very strong meaning to something that I overheard or saw or whatever. And it's like, you got to take a moment and actually think like, all right, let me put myself in their world. Like, what is this actually going on? Yeah.
When you notice that flare, like when your body gives you a flare in response to something, part of learning about myself and learning how I want to be has been learning how to, notice the flare,
right?
Feel my fucking body, and then allow myself to become curious when I notice the flare instead of just automatically, this is what this means.
Right.
Leading with curiosity about the other person's experience, what it means for the other person, and just like gathering more perspectives than just mine about something.
Yes, 100%.
So
this was so lovely. I feel like I took a lot away personally from everything that you shared today. I love this conversation as our first in 2025. It feels so grounded.
This felt like warm baked bread.
Ooh,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like it's adding to the coziness.
Yeah.
And seriously, we could go on for
Except
like 2 more hours.
It's one of those. Have you seen these sourdoughs where they add activated charcoal to it, and so it makes it black, and then you like can carve like skeleton faces in it?
Even better.
That is
Oh
the
my
bread.
God.
That
I didn't
is
know
our
bread
bread.
could be cool.
That we just enjoy our cozy core
Nom, nom,
bread,
nom, nom, nom.
gothy bread. We just enjoy
Yes.
together. Elliot, where can people find you? Where do you want people to find you?
I'm pretty elusive on the internet. Over the past few years, I've kind of pulled back a lot from social media. So people can try to look at my Instagram, but it's private. But it's just _uncle_birdie_. I think there's a lot of underscores in there. You can follow Cruise LA. You can come to the Eagle. I'm at the Eagle frequently. I'll be go-go dancing at Dive at the Precinct on January 28th.
Yeah.
Nice. And remind our listeners when Cruise happens at the Eagle.
Yeah, Cruise happens on the third Saturday of each month, except we're taking a month off in January because we need rest.
Good for you.
But we'll be back in February. So third Saturday of each month at Eagle LA from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m.
So instead of dry January, you guys are doing no cruising January.
No cruising January. We're saying there's no official cruise. So if our beautiful cruise community still wants to show up on the 3rd January and occupy that space, then I encourage them to do so.
I might still do it. It's in my calendar. I have a monthly
I love
reminder. So I'll probably be there.
Yeah.
And I guess along those lines, Fuck Yeah is going to be taking a break. And as always, we never know how long it's going to be.
It's going to be as long as it needs to be.
It's going to be as long as it needs to be. We will be back. We just don't know exactly what form and what time frame and all those things. But in the meantime, you can find us at Fuck Yeah Pod on Instagram and TikTok. You can email us fyeahpod@gmail.com. And, we'll keep some activity going on the socials for sure.
And if you miss us, go into that back catalog. We got a lot of episodes at this point. I'm pretty proud of all the work we've done.
Yeah, we're almost at 100. So for sure, Fuck Yeah is going to make it to 100 episodes.
Yeah.
We just don't know when.
Yeah. And that's okay. We're going to just sit in the slow discernment of our break.
Of 2025.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to Fiercely Independent Media. Fuck Yeah Podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by Robin Jennings and Sarah Tom Chesson, also known as my mom. Theme music by Suno AI. Your support means a lot. You can give to the show and receive perks at patreon.com/fuckyeahpod. You can also rate and review the show or share it with a friend. You can reach us at fyeahpod@gmail.com. Bye for now.